Hi everybody, my name is Samer Aoudi. This is video number 5 in the Kali Linux Security Tools series. We're still in the information gathering group, and our category for today is open source intelligence, which is in essence a methodology for collecting, analyzing, and making decisions about data which is accessible in publicly available sources, thus open source. Our first tool, Maltego, is software used for open source intelligence, but also for forensics. It is created by a company called Paterva. Maltego provides a library of something called transforms to mine data from open sources. The data is then presented visually in a graph format. Maltego is pre-installed in Kali, but you need to select the edition before you continue. In our case, it will be the free or the community edition. You need to then register with a valid email in order to receive an activation key. While the tool is amazing, the free edition is very limited. It is limited in available transforms, but also in the amount of data you can discover. Therefore, in this demo, I will show you how the tool is used and give you a taste of Maltego. The first time you open Maltego, you will be given the choice to open an example graph, which is what you see here in front of you. If you haven't used it before, it is highly recommended that you get a feeling of how the final outcome or output of your work will look like. So what you see here, let me zoom in and show you some of the features. Each one of those items on the graph is an entity. In Maltego, an entity is a piece of information shown as a node on the graph. Different entity types are used to differentiate between the different pieces of information that can be represented in Maltego, meaning they look different. As you can see here, an IP address, a domain, DNS, and so on. Entities can be anything from a DNS name, a person name, a phone number, an email address, and so on and so forth. So let me go ahead and create a new graph. This is the Maltego Transform Hub, where you can see the different transforms available from Maltego's partners. I now have an empty canvas to start my project. I will start with a domain like paterva.com. So this is an entity. When you double click it, you will see its details, attachments, notes, properties, and so on. You can change the value of this entity either from here by double clicking the name, or from the properties or the details window. The next step after you define the properties of your entity is to run something called a transform. In Maltego, a transform is a piece of code that searches for information related to an entity on the graph. Basically, transforms are your worker bees, and to use them, you right-click an entity and see the available transforms. Let me see if I can find some files and documents from this domain. Maltego was able to find one document. So now the document is linked to the original entity and it's an entity on its own, meaning I can run transforms on it. But before I do that, I will run some additional transforms on the original entity. As you can see in the output area, there isn't an answer for this entity. In other way, Maltego couldn't find mail server information for Altoro Mutual. And for your information, Altoro Mutual is a fake bank available for web application security testing. A website, a domain, must have a name server. Next, I'm going to choose one of the name server and perform a transform on it. As you can see now, the graph is starting to get bigger and bigger, and Maltego is doing all the legwork to get me all this open source data from the net. So what is next? Next is to really explore what entities are available in Maltego, and for each entity what transforms are available, and use them the way that you like. Our next tool is Spiderfoot. Spiderfoot is a reconnaissance tool which is grouped here under the open source intelligence analysis tools because it allows us to query tens of public data sources to gather intelligence on things like IP addresses, domain name, email addresses, names, and more. As you will see shortly, Spiderfoot is two tools in one, or maybe one tool with two different components. Anyway, I will let you decide. Basically, we have the Spiderfoot server, which I will run in this terminal right here on the left, and I have the Spiderfoot command line interface, or CLI, which I will run in the terminal here on the right. So let us get started. Basically, the server is doing all the work. And at this point, using the CLI, I can run any of the commands that are available for me, and I can use one of the tens of modules available for intelligence and data gathering. But since the server is running, Spiderfoot actually has a web interface, and it's accessible through the address that I just entered, which is basically the loopback address on port 80. The reason I use port 80 is it's the default port for a web server, and therefore I don't have to explicitly write it in the address. Let's see what I'm talking about. Had I used any other port, I would have had to explicitly write the port right here, for example, 5001. But since it's port 80, I don't have to. You can start a new scan using one of three different approaches, either by the use case, for example, an investigation, or footprinting, or passive intelligence. So you can choose based on your needs, as you can see here in this page. Or two, by required data, meaning what data we are looking for. Or three, by module. And as you can see, I have a lot of modules available, and basically to use Spiderfoot effectively, you would need to know what modules are there and then use them accordingly. Today I won $100 million or so, according to this email address and the email that I received today. So I'm gonna go ahead and use it as an example and investigate this email address. So as you can see here, I got some raw data And one of the properties or one of the fields is suspicious and the value is true.